I can only think of one person who struggled to the very end, not wanting to go. But everybody else, I understand that I'm not this person. This is just one of this part of me is eternal. And this part of me that was called into being was each one of these worlds was alive, and it was me. Everybody's understanding of the reality is actually only, I've always tried to help people understand that you don't need me. The energy of the divine is the actual.
On today's episode of the Chris Senise Podcast, I welcome back Peter Panagore, a visionary in the world of divinity and spiritual practice. Today, I feel blessed to have him back on as we talk more about his journey from early spiritual awakenings to his current work guiding others toward clarity, peace, and a meaningful life. Peter is an Audible international bestselling author of Heaven is Beautiful and an accomplished spiritual counselor, scholar, storyteller, among many, many, many other roles. He's committed his life to helping people connect more deeply with their inner selves and the world around them, and reminds us that the guru is within. Take a listen. The Chris Senise Podcast is about becoming the best version of yourself while living your best life. This podcast dives into neuroscience, energy healing, manifesting, workplace strategies, and conflict resilience with real conversations and practical insights you can use right now. Subscribe and join a community that's all about growth, curiosity, and living your best life. Let's explore what's possible together. Peter, I am so happy that you wanted to come back because you have been one of my best episodes. People are really fascinated with near-death experiences. But I did mention to you that I wanted this to come out December 24th, in time for Christmas, because I actually want to talk about not church.
All right.
Tell me about not church.
Not church was born because I'd been planning after my near-death experience. I went to Divinity school and I studied mysticism, and my intention was never to become a minister. That was not my plan. My plan was to go on to get my doctorate in mystical studies, East and West, and do a comparative a life of comparative mysticism, symbol and allegory and myth and all this stuff. And I got talked into being a minister by the dean who had given me this 3-year independent study. But for all of the time of my life, I continued to read and study. So one of the reasons why I was a minister is so I could study ancient esoteric texts, all of the Nag Hammadi texts, all the Dead Sea Scrolls, a lot of literature from the East, and so when my TV show ended, I was like, now what am I going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the thing that I've been trying to do for the whole of my life. And so I decided to have Not Church. And Not Church was, I named it Not Church because it would have aspects of church in it because I've been studying scriptures, right? But it's definitely not church because it's an entirely different perspective than most people had ever heard in church. And so on an Easter morning, 5 or 6 years ago, I decided I think I was wearing a straw hat and I was sitting out next to the pond and I was like, I'm just going to do this thing. And I just threw on the camera and I began talking. And it eventually it developed into a deep study. So the last thing we studied was the Gospel of Mary. And we did the Gospel of Thomas. We did a lot of the Upanishads and the Vedas in comparison, the Bhagavad Gita in comparison, the Tao Te Ching in comparison. And it was essentially an exploration of what I learned in my near-death experience, which is that and also when I was in grad school, all of mystical literature throughout the world, Rumi, Hafez, Saint Teresa, John of the Cross, Jesus, Muhammad, everybody talks in metaphor, because it's the thing that cannot be spoken. And so in the cultural context of India, the mythology that developed out of the same spirituality became the Bhagavad Gita.
Right.
And in Christianity it became what it is. And so I was looking for threads that ran through all of them. And there are definitely threads that run through all of it. And it's always about light, love, and singularity. Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas talks about the singleness. In the Yoga Sutras, they talk about oneness. And it's the same thing. It's just different language.
Yeah. So this reminds me of a little bit of Joseph Campbell. Are you
Big
familiar
fan.
with Joseph?
Big fan.
Yeah, totally. Um, Very eye-opening the first time I found out about him. And because he studied almost all the religions of the world, right?
Mm.
To find exactly what you just said.
He
That
was
there
an
was like,
inspiration.
tell me about that because
Well,
I'm a fan.
I
And I'm a
watched.
fan of yours.
Well,
So
thanks. I watched this. There was a series back on in the 70s or 80s,
really?
where he was, yeah, and he was interviewed, and maybe Bill Moyers interviewed him. It might have been. Now I'm tapping way back into my head. It could have been Bill Moyers, and I heard him talk, and I thought, oh my God, this guy, he's speaking my language, the heroic
Yeah.
journey, and it shows up
Mhm.
all over the world, and that's
Right.
what the mystical journey is. It's the heroic journey into original self. And what it requires all over the world, it requires the stripping away of one's attachment to one's own egoic self, which allows the true self to emerge. And yeah, so Joseph Campbell, what a guy.
Wow. So I first heard of him maybe 10 years ago through Finding Joe, which is, and I remember that was, when Amazon Prime first came out, it was like the only thing I bought ever. Like I wasn't because I needed to be reminded. I wanted to remember. And so I always wanted to have it there. And I was raised Catholic and maybe knew of the main stuff, right? Like Catholic, Judaism, and a little bit of Islam, right? But that was it. Not much exposure. I think when you're raised in a religion, I mean, it's not until you go exploring on your own that you realize there's more than even those three. Um, and I remember that documentary being so like, but so you're saying back in the 70s?
70s, 80s. I'm not sure. I remember watching. It might have been in the 80s.
Yeah.
But it could have been, I'm not sure exactly when it was. It was a long time ago. But he was talking, he was
Yeah.
speaking my language.
How did he hook you in? Like,
Uh,
what was your language?
oh, I was already, before I even died, I was an English major. So symbol,
Right.
myth, allegory, it was my thing. And it was the thing that I was,
Yeah.
the reason why I became an English major is because I was good at it. It was just like,
Right.
I couldn't do math. I was bad at math,
Yeah.
but I could do this.
Right.
So he was talking my language, and I was already reading into the American transcendentalists and the romantics and those people, and so I was
Yeah.
seeing a parallel to what he was saying into these
Yeah.
transcendentalist romantic writers, and I was like, oh, this
Right.
guy, I want to be him.
Yeah. I mean, I think the documentary is great because it even shows things from like Star Wars and stuff. So it really for not people like you who this is their life's passion, but like for regular people, it helps us start to connect dots that maybe we didn't realize before. I mean, I think it all just in the end comes down to be good
Be good and love. That's it.
and love. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Treasure of heaven.
And yeah. And so then from there, where did that take you?
Oh, well, it took me into divinity school, basically. It was either, first of all, I was utterly alone. And there was no internet. I didn't even know what this thing was called. I knew that it was a lived experience. It wasn't something in my past. Yes, I died
Sure.
and I came back, but every single day of my life, I was living in the presence of the divine in a radiant way that was also confusing. And it wasn't like,
Yeah.
it wasn't all bliss. It was crazy making in some ways, because I could feel other
Yeah.
people's emotions and I could see the light inside of them, and I could see things before they happened and all sorts of weird stuff. And I saw Joseph Campbell, and I was like, oh, maybe I should study this stuff. And so I don't know whether I saw him before or after I took this class,
Yeah.
and East-West mysticism as an undergraduate. And then I realized that I could make a career of this. I could hide my near-death experience inside of the study of mysticism, and nobody would ever know. And so
Yeah.
that was a big motivator. So then I just started reading. So when I was a minister, I was a United Church of Christ minister, congregational, New England, descendants of the colonists, of whom I now have a very low opinion, even though my part of my family comes from the colonists. Because they did bad things. They did bad things. So anyway, the Congregationalist United Church of Christ grew out of that, and they're super socially justice oriented, working with the homeless, working with domestic violence, working with the poor. So it's like, that's up my alley. So I hid inside the church while I continued my studies and my interior yoga practices, which also I kept hidden because, yoga, people in my towns knew I was standing on my head, but they didn't know why I was standing on my head. And, and that's okay. And the other thing I hid was reincarnation. I totally never, ever talked about that. But yet that's how I'm living that way. So one thing led to the next. I became a minister. I did that for 18 years. I got recruited into television. I did that for 15 years. And then I started Not Church. And now Not Church is still on YouTube, hundreds of episodes, but I'm not producing it anymore. I've had to stop producing Not Church because I'm working in the maximum security prison now, 40 hours a week. So, all the time to produce one Not Church on Sunday would take me 2 days of writing, reading and writing and, refining. And of course you do. You did right. Yeah. This little much takes this much.
I know.
I'm sure that when you're performing, you don't just jump on stage. You rehearse and practiced all of your life to get to the place where you are. So I ended up doing that, and I had to stop Not Church. As much fun as it was, I found this calling to throughout my career. I've been recruited. I've been not looking for something, and something happens, and here I am in this new job. And in every single one of those jobs, there's always been a major twist within the first couple of months. Like I come in thinking one thing, and then I find out it's entirely different. And so what happened this time was that I came in expecting a second chaplain to be there, and the second chaplain was there. And now the first chaplain who was going to train me is gone. And so I'm basically with 1,000 residents in this prison, and not really knowing what I'm doing, because I don't know all the ins and outs. And now I'm doing the job's bigger than I thought it was, but I have great help. I have 2 residents who are my clerks who know the ropes, and I've got a lot of support. But I had to stop Not Church, and I had to stop Mystic Tea Salon too. Because that community is continuing on. I tried to set it up in such a way that they wouldn't need me. That is an important thing I need to say, is that throughout my entire career, I've always tried, and as a professional religious person, but also as a spiritual person, I've always tried to help people understand that you don't need me. I am passing through. And so in the churches that I served, I helped them understand. I tried to empower the people, the community, to own its own self, because I was going to leave. And so all the way through Not Church, I was doing the same thing. I didn't intend to leave. I intended to keep this going. But then when this job came up, I felt like I was needed. And since I've been working there since early September, 3.5 months of training. I just graduated last week.
Okay.
So I was working half-time in the prison.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I got my first a certificate of participation, because which is so I went to the Corrections Academy for the Justice Academy with all the corrections officers. But I didn't graduate, actually. I got a certificate of participation, which I find is hysterical. But so
means you were there.
I was there, and I did take classes with them and all that kind of stuff, and it was good. But I have had 100 deja vu since I started working in the prison. Had a long
Really?
one today. Yeah, like part of my near death experience is that when I was coming back and I made this choice to choose the kind of life that I would live in this body, I had a million different choices, and I made this decision,
Yeah.
and I passed through this what I've come to call a field of probabilities, and down this one tunnel, and in this tunnel there were all these doorways that led to all these other tunnels, which are all part of the field of probability. And
Right.
so and it took me the longest time in my life, okay, to understand what was going on, and it was always very disruptive for me for about 10 or 15 years. I'd have these waves of deja vu run through me where not only could I see that I had already done this, but I was like a step ahead. Like I could see that it was coming. It wasn't, I could see what was coming. Kind of like in Star Wars with Luke when he learns to avoid with the mask on in the first movie, and he's trying to, and hit. I could see it coming just before it came. And
So deja vu is when you feel you've been somewhere before,
yeah,
right?
yes,
But you could see that coming.
I could see that coming. And then it was not just feel that I've been there before. I could see the entire thing happen like a fraction of a second before it happens. It happened today. I was sitting at my desk, and I have one of these clerks. And these people are long-termers. They did something terrible in their life, and now they're trying to transform. And that's the thing about the main correct model of corrections. It's not about what's the word I'm looking for? It's not about trying to reform you. It's all about trying to help you transform yourself. And so this guy's sitting across from me telling me his story. And, it's pretty, Anyway, as he's telling me this,
What was like that? What he did or who he was?
a little of both.
Okay.
Not who he is, but
Yeah.
who he was. And
Who he was, right.
And as he's telling me this story, I suddenly lean back. And when I do counseling, I do this thing that I learned a long time ago from a monk. Part of neurolinguistic programming is trying to mirror subtly the other person. And because if you mirror the other person while you're talking to them, they're more likely to talk more to you. You don't do so. If they're sitting here like this, you don't do this.
Sure.
You do this or this or something and you don't make it obvious. Anyway, so he's talking to me, and he leaned back, and so I leaned back in my chair. And as I leaned back in my chair, there's like this whole next 5 minutes, I dreamt all of this. This is all because it comes back to me like dream, and I was like, I dreamt all of this. Now I know where I was, because in the dream, I don't know where I am. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what's going on. I'm just kind of there. And now it's like, oh yeah, this guy and this event. And I've had 100 of them since I started working in the prison. And they're pretty common in my life anyway. But when they happen, people say, oh, that's meant to be. That's not really the way I see it. I see it as in the field of probability, I make decisions, or other people make decisions that impacts my life 100 times a day. And it leads me to this place. And so as I move through this life of decision-making and decisions made around me, I get oriented into this particular spot, which I experienced in the field of probability. And so it's not like it was meant to be so much as it was one of the things that could be. But yet they come back to me like dreams, like very like I'm remembering a dream, but it's more it's visceral and tactile. And so I was describing this to my wife maybe again and again and again, over the years. She's like, Peter, it's probably from that field of probability you talk about. It's probably that you already experienced it there. And now it's become, so I didn't figure this out. She did.
He did.
She did.
Seriously, like what a blessing that she gets you in that way.
In a way.
In a way. I mean, she's not going to fully get you, right? Because it is unusual what's happened to you. It's not like it happens to everyone. And even the events that came after that. But I mean, it's better than, I mean, you masked for a really long time, right? Because if I remember correctly, you told your wife on your wedding night.
And actually, she told me that I told her on the wedding morning in bed and told her
Okay.
the story. And then I remember this part saying, we could get divorced today. That we could end this right now because, this thing is, you've seen, she was exposed to me, right? So she knew
Hmm.
me. She just didn't know the reason. I said, I didn't tell you the whole story. And so she said, no, let's, and we're still married. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
it's been no cherries and, cream for her. It's been, because it makes me make unusual choices.
Hmm.
And she's wonderful. And thank God she's a science math head. So that a
Uh-huh.
lot of practicality there. And,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
We complement each other. It's good that way. But it's
Hmm.
being married to a near-death experiencer is um, not the easiest thing in the world. My value
Yeah.
system is at odds to the world, generally speaking.
Sure. Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Because I would think that I'm just, I don't even know if this would be correct or not, but I would think that most people live with a sense of fear that you don't, correct?
no, and that was actually, you put your finger right on it. And
Yeah.
because in my church ministry, I was always in the midst of drama, trauma, and danger. And it wasn't like milk toast. And, I did have tea with the old ladies. Okay. There was that kind of thing actually happened. But there were murders and decapitations and arsons and domestic violence and homicides and all sorts of stalkers, did I say arsonists? All sorts of stuff that I was always in the middle of. Plus, there was divorces and deaths and a trauma in people's lives,
Yeah.
car wrecks, and I was always in the
Mhm.
middle of that mix. And I was often, there was this one day where I got a call from the lieutenant at the police department, small town
Okay.
lieutenant, and I know this guy. I'll tell you two stories. And
Okay.
this is the first one: is that he said, "Peter, we have a hostage situation, a husband and wife and a child, and the husband's locked in the bathroom with a pistol, and he'll only talk to you." Like, what do you want me to do? He said, well, come on over. So I drove over and I get there and he said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to give you this ballistic shield. So I had this ballistic shield in front of me. I had two
Mhm.
officers with their pistols drawn over and their fingers on the trigger and the safety's off over my shoulders, going into this guy's house. And the lieutenant's like, are you scared? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm interested. But what's the worst?
Yeah.
What's the worst he can do to me? Kill me?
Die?
So it turned out that I talked him out. I talked him down, and it ended. And then another day, I got a call from the same lieutenant, and I'm in my office at the church, and he says, Peter, there's an escaped convict murderer on the run from a federal prison in Oklahoma. And he's made it to Maine, and he's stopped all, they've been tracing him. The FBI's been after this guy. They've been tracing him all the way, and he's been stopping at churches 1 foot ahead of the law and asking for money. And we believe that he's in the area. And if he shows up, delay him and call me. So like an hour later, there's a knock at my door, and my secretary opens the door and she says, Peter, there's a fellow here interested in, can you maybe help him out? And I had this sugar daddy, anonymous sugar daddy, who provided a very large fund every year for me to distribute to
Mhm.
anybody in need: roofs on houses, car repairs, childcare, all sorts of stuff. Anything anybody needed, I could help them. And so this guy, he comes in, and he's like 6'4", and he's a big, tall guy, and he introduces himself, lying to me, right? Okay, so not telling me the truth.
Yeah.
And he sits down, and I can hear his Oklahoma accent, and we start to talk, and he says, I need some money, and I'm like, okay, I don't have the checkbook in here. why don't you just sit here for a minute, and I'm going to go into the other office there, and I'll get the checkbook, and I'll be right back in. So I go in and I pick up the phone. And I'm like, Lieutenant, this guy's actually here. He said, leave the doors open. I had 2 doors to my office. And so I come back in, and he said, we'll be there in 5 minutes. Just keep them. So I'm writing really slowly. I put the pen down. I talk to him a little bit more. And I write a little more, and I put the pen down. And suddenly cops burst in from the doors and have a fight in the pastor's office. They have this wrestling match with this guy, and they bring him down, and he is livid. He's screaming and yelling and threatening me. He's, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get you. He's calling me all sorts of names, and they dragged him off. And I could go home and tell my wife both of these stories, and it's not, other minister friends, they're not doing that. This kind of stuff just doesn't happen to them. And so, in terms of the marriage, it's been great, up times and down times, like all marriages. But I think that it's the day that I went into television, my wife was like, thank God you're not a minister anymore. You're not going to be in with those dangerous, violent people.
Yeah. Were you with dangerous, violent people on TV?
No, not at all.
No.
It was It was the best. It was the best gig ever.
Yeah. And so, I can see how for you, everything is just so different. You probably don't have the same fears a lot of us have of, I can hear about a near-death experience, but I didn't live it. It wasn't my lived experience. So I just have to take your word for it, right? That's what's going to happen. But it doesn't mean people aren't scared, right?
Most people are scared, and I understand that intellectually. I don't understand it psychologically, emotionally, or spiritually, because it's just not my lived experience anymore. But I've been with plenty of dying people. I've been around a lot of terminally ill people and been there when they've died. And in the end, I can only think of one person who struggled to the very end, not wanting to go, and finally died kind of in fear, in the grip. But everybody else, even in the last moment, there's like this release of peace. So there's really nothing to be afraid of, but it's like saying to someone, oh, don't feel badly. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, sometimes, I just I'll think about, death. And I personally don't feel like it's something I'm afraid of, but then I haven't had, any kind of moment that's been scary for me either. So it's like the kind of thing of, it's easy to say because it hasn't happened to you or you don't know. Or maybe if I did know, then I wouldn't be afraid, right? But I'm personally not that afraid. And then I think about it this could be way out there, but I personally think of it in terms of but it's going to happen to us all. How bad can it be?
Dying can be terrible.
Reincarnation. What happens? What happens, Peter? Tell me about reincarnation.
I understand. That's another aspect of this, is that I understand that I'm not this person. This is just one of the shells that I've lived inside of. And it's not like I've decided this, okay? It wasn't an intellectual decision. I read about reincarnation. I'm like, oh, I'm going to believe that. That's not what I'm talking about. I have this consistent understanding that the body in which I live is temporary, and that the soul who I am is permanent, and that the soul who I am, I saw on the other side. I entered into a couple of previous lives while I was dead. I don't know if I told you about that or not before. But so there was a period of time, that's a misnomer, because there's no time. All right. So there was a thing that happened to me when I was dead, among other things, where I saw, I was a photon twined with all this field of photons, constructing the emanating light of the divine, of millions of points that were independent and yet entangled. And I was sort of outside of this field, but connected to it. It was like
Yeah.
like a straight up and down. I was just adjacent is a word. And then I could see below. I was shown below, and below in this infinite darkness was this tube, and this tube was me, another part of me, a lower part of me, the part of me that was being called into being. So this part of me that was entangled is eternal. And this part of me that was called into being was emanated out of the divine, but it was my soul self. And it was called into being by a name, but I can't say because, no sound there. But this soul self was like a tube. And inside of this tube were all of these like worlds. And each one of these worlds was alive, and it was me. I was the world. It wasn't like a planet and I was on the planet. The planet was me. But it's not like the LDS church where you die and you get your own planet. It's like everybody's world is inside their head. You know what I mean? Everybody's understanding of the reality is actually only here. And so there's all these, and they're all in this like chronological sequence, and they all kind of look different from each other, but I'm alive in all of them, and I'm not one of them. I'm the soul, and I'm not even the soul. I'm this other part of me that's higher than that. And so I look down because it seems to be below me, and the divine presence is with me. And I say to the divine presence turns my attention away from this field of photons. I'm like turned to see this tube, this soul part of myself. And I say telepathically without language, can I experience them? And so I'm zapped down inside of a life, and I'm in this guy's body. So I'm in a guy's body. It's not my body, right? It's this other person, but I'm the soul inside this body, and I enter into this guy's body, and I got hairy legs and sandals on my feet and dirty toenails, and I've got I'm wearing clothes, but they're not like pants, and I'm walking down a dusty road in a desert-like situation with palm trees and couple of low houses, and there's kind of people going by and not very crowded, but with a bunch of guys, and we're having this conversation, and I look back and I can see they're all like black curly hair, dark skin, big beards. They're all dressed like me, and we're having an animated. It's obvious that we're friends. We're speaking in another language, and I understand them, and we're having a spiritual conversation. And I'm kind of in the front of the crowd, and I'm looking back over my shoulder, and they ask me a question, and I'm just about to answer, and I'm pulled out. And then I'm kind of like boomeranged out, and I go back in the chronological timeline, and I'm in this other world. And in this other world, I'm a little lizard or a little reptile of some kind. And I've got a much smaller brain. And so I'm thinking with this reptile brain, but I also have my soul self. So I also have this other level of comprehension, which is what happened to me when I was in this guy's body. I knew what was going on, and I know what's going on with this little lizard thing. And I'm looking through its eyes, and I can see the world looks entirely different. I don't know where I am, Earth, ancient Earth. I have no idea, because I have a different set of eyeballs, and I'm looking at a different world. But I know that I'm among plants. And I know that I'm in a shadow. I'm perfectly still because there's a predator hunting me. And there's a predator, a big predator. I'm this little tiny thing. There's a big predator, and I know it knows I'm there, and I'm trying to hide. And I'm so perfectly still. And I wasn't afraid. I was just locked in. And then I was pulled out. And so, and so here's all these lives, many, many, many lives. And none of them were me. I'm always this other thing. I'm inhabiting this space.
Yeah. In terms of this world, do you have a sense for how long that was in time?
It was long enough for me. It was long enough for my climbing partner, Tim, to think I was dead and tried to revive me. I don't really know. From my point of view, it was long. It was a lot of things happened. But I never talked to him about it, partly because I was we were hanging on the edge of a cliff, and he was in hypothermia too, but also he was an atheist. And on the drive up, we had decided to keep spirituality and religion off the table.
Oh,
So no talk
what are
of,
the chances?
yeah, right.
What are the chances?
But on the upside, he had 100 jazz, home recorded jazz tapes. And so he was the guy who exposed me to jazz. We listened to 2 hours, and I was like, I came away liking jazz. So on the
Yeah.
upside, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I never told him, and I didn't tell him I died. He said, I
Right.
thought you were dead, and I didn't ever answered him because I
Yeah.
didn't really know what had happened to me. I just know that I was in a whole wellness, perfect being place, and now I'm back in this hellscape. And I was,
Yeah.
I was messed up.
Yeah. And this was at a time, so, and you never spoke to him about this ever?
I never talked to anybody about it. I told my wife, and
Right.
I told my best friend when we were backpacking 2 years later. And
Okay.
he's still a friend of mine, but at the time I told
Yeah.
my friend, I didn't have any language for it. I wasn't really able to tell him about it. By the time
Yeah.
I told my wife, I had a little more language about it, but I never told Tim.
Yeah.
I never told, I didn't tell anybody. It was so, when I went to Divinity school, I was the only I was one of the only, not the only person, but I was one of the only people who lived off campus because I didn't want to be in the milieu of the Divinity school. And
Okay.
I was the only one doing yoga. There was nobody else doing yoga in
Yeah.
the school. And
Yeah.
I was kind of the long hair, barefooted hippie guy.
Yeah.
He's a little weird guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meditating all the time, meditating class, meditating lunch, meditate all over the place.
Yeah. It's interesting. You did mention earlier about how with a lot of this happening, it was so far before the internet, right? Like now everyone does yoga, everyone tries to meditate. A lot of, the things that you were doing before a lot of other people were doing it, right? Like now it's,
Now it's in,
we
but
talk about it a lot
right.
on the internet, but um were those also ways for you to cope with what had happened? Was that like, this is the best I could do right now because this is wacky, or like I don't even have words for this and I can't talk to anybody about it?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
I found that in meditation, and when I talk about yoga, I'm particularly talking about Kriya Yoga, coming out of the Yoga
Yeah.
Sutras, which I read right after I died. They fell into my lap, you know how that happens, and so they
Oh.
influenced my meditation life and my yoga life. I had begun practicing yoga because I was studying mime theater, pantomime, Marceau's school. And I was in the United States, so he wasn't my teacher, but in his school,
Yeah.
they practiced yoga. And so I began yoga, read Paramahansa Yogananda, read the Yoga Sutras. I'd already been meditating, mushed them all together, and found that the silence inside myself was the only place that I was. And so by entering into the silent place, I could renew my connection to myself, my capital S self, to my original self,
Yeah.
to the divine presence. And not only that, it allowed the energy that came back with me, the prana, the shakti, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, this physical interaction space where my soul interacts with my body, that energy became expansive. It became more tactile, more, my senses integrated better, like my hearing, I'm sorry, point to my eye, my hearing, my seeing, my tasting and my smelling, because that's how it feels to me on this energetic level, is that it's all one sense. So I see the light, but I also feel it, and I also taste it and smell it. And in this practice, the interior journey made that more pronounced, more receptive. And so when I was practicing all of these things early on, there were some people, I practiced with some Sikhs for a while, Kundalini yoga, back in the 70s and late 70s. What was that? No, it was 80. It was 80 and 81. And So there are pockets of people who weren't doing lowercase s yoga about you know, making your ass look nice and having strength,
Sure.
which is true. You know, you practice yoga, you
Yeah.
get strong,
Yeah.
right? And you get
Yeah.
flexible. They were practicing yoga of energy. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the path that I ended up taking. And it's paid off in a million different ways.
It's hard for me to believe that this is not that you were not chosen for this, if that means anything, right? In my mind, that's how it feels. Like, okay, so this happened to you not once but twice. It took you on a path, right? It's not like it happened to you and just you just continued on the path you had, because it was well, no, you said you studied English literature, correct? The
Yes.
family practice was architecture,
Yeah.
right? But this happened to you and you were going like this, and then you went like, okay, we're going to go this way kind of thing, right? And I know you mentioned the ego earlier, and we'll get back to that, but how do you not feel like you were chosen for this specific thing?
Well, when I started having, when I was 5 and 6, and then probably 18 or 19, and then 19 for sure, I had a whole series of mystical experiences starting when I was very young that were out of the ordinary. And I learned after my first experience when I was 5 not to talk about it. And so I didn't understand them. And when I came back the first time, all of the experiences that I'd had over all of those years set me up. Only in hindsight could I see that they taught me things that I needed to understand, and in order
Mm,
to have my near death experience and not be frightened as I died. And also when the angelic consciousness, angel, whatever you want to call it, took me, and the silver cord to my body was severed. And all the other experiences I'd had, that silver cord, I was connected. But this time when I died, it was cut off. And so am I chosen? I don't, you know, it doesn't seem that way to me. What it seems
okay.
to me is like, I've been on this path longer than this lifetime, and that there's been an accumulation of experiences that have prepared me for this particular time. There are people who are natural born mystics. They come in and they have mystical experiences. I'm one of those people. And
Mhm.
you know, did I choose it on the other side? Did it choose me? I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that in
Right.
my very first experience when I was 5, the reason I was brought back into the divine presence was so that as a human being, I would understand that I'd already made a deal with the divine. And the deal with the divine was that I belonged to the divine. And that's the way my 5-year-old brain interpreted it. I belonged to God, and that I would work for God for the entirety of my life. And that was a
Right.
5-year-old's interpretation. Um,
Sure.
and so was I chosen for it? I've had all these other experiences. I think that my mission here is to embody as much of the light as I can, which is not me, right? It's not my egoic self, and to
Hmm.
give away all of it that I can. That's my job.
Hmm.
Is just to give it away,
Yeah.
give it away, give it away, and then die and go on. And so I also had this experience in one of my mystical experiences where I was in the middle of our universe, and I could see our universe. I was in the middle of the universe, in between galaxies, and I was teeny tiny, insignificant in time and space.
Right.
And so chosen, not chosen is really, I'm insignificant in
Yeah.
time and space. So you know, I'm just doing
Yeah.
what I can do.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it in terms of, you know, not everyone is called, everyone has a purpose, right? In this world or whatever we call it, right? But not all of us are called to heal. And you have been, right? That's why I say it's, we could say it's a calling or being chosen, or you, like chosen feels like it comes from the ego kind of,
And
so
see,
maybe
that's my
that's
problem.
not.
That's the problem with it for
Yeah,
me.
maybe that's why it doesn't, I think in these days my whole thing is detachment and the ego. I think that's like where I'm at right now. It's very difficult, by the way. It's
Well,
very
you
difficult.
never completely lose it, because if you lose it, you'd not be able to function.
Yeah, yeah. That I think that's actually where I'm at, right? Is understanding that you need ego because it's what drives you. It's what makes you say, "Hey, I can do this." It, helps you prepare for things and think things through and think ahead, but it's the ego that creates, I don't know what word to use, but I guess problems for us, that interferes with us and our goodness. We were talking about goodness before, right? It's that selflessness of I'm not attached to an outcome kind of thing. That's where I'm at spiritually.
That's a good place to be. It doesn't prevent disappointment. It doesn't prevent, um, oh, I could have done better, because you still
Hmm.
get yourself. But to be non-attached to the entire identity of who we are is entirely
Yeah.
different, a different experience, even while you're trying to strive in the world to do whatever this thing is you want to do.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm striving in the world right now. I'm striving to do the best job that I can in the new position
Yeah.
that I have, and for the
Hmm.
people that I'm working with. So I have a
Right.
striving that I want to do. I don't want to do well in, but I also know
Hmm.
that I'm not from here. I'm not from here. I'm not this guy. I know where I'm from. I know to whom I belong. I know where I'm going. And so that alone kind of gives me a leg up on the
Yeah.
whole practice. And so the practice of non-attachment isn't just deciding to be non-attached. It's actually inside of the yogic practice of union and the meditative practice of silence. It's the core of
Yeah.
those two things, and
Hmm.
probably of other things too. Those are just the things that I have ended up practicing in this lifetime. But in the
Right.
practice itself, when one uh, touches into the space of silence, not mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of a partial aspect of meditation that I practice
Right.
anyway. But
Hmm.
in the place of non-thought, when I'm not trying, when I'm using my chant and my breath and my body to bring my mind to the place where I'm only aware of my breathing, or not even aware of that. In that
Right.
space is the non-attachment. And the more one touches that space of non attachment, the more that accumulates naturally. And so then that just is
Right.
an outcome rather than the
Yeah.
purpose.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it,
And
and
it's,
mm,
yeah, and I think it's also important to highlight that detachment doesn't mean not caring. Because
oh no,
I had someone say that to me the other day. I'm like, no, like, no, why? No, that's not what I'm saying, and that's not even what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm gonna stop caring about my husband, my kids, my dogs. No,
no.
no. And I'm like, what would you just? I didn't even know how to answer that because it's a new practice for me. It's not something that I've been studying my entire life. What would you say to someone who says that to you?
I would say that you have a complete misunderstanding of what I'm talking about. And because
Mm-hmm.
it's not detachment, it's not
Oh,
depersonalization, it's non-attachment. And so
oh,
it's
got it.
not, I'm not detaching from my wife, or if my kids, my grandkids.
Yeah,
I love them and I will do everything I can for them. Um,
yeah,
I'm not attaching to my own egoic self. It's not to anything outside. It's only to the attachment to my own identity. And when one
yeah.
becomes non-attached to one's egoic identity, it actually makes it easier to love people and care for them, and to care and to care for the world, and to take actions that benefit them and not benefit you.
Right.
And so it's the opposite of detachment. It's actually compassion.
That was a beautiful explanation. That was a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks.
Actually.
It comes out of the experience of the thing itself. It also teaches itself. So it's not like I know I spent the last 3 years teaching the Yoga Sutras and Kriya Yoga to this private group, and I helped them along far enough to understand that the energy of the divine, the presence of the divine, is the actual teacher. And by entering into the silence, then that expresses its own meaning, its own direction, its own guidance. And it's not like turn left at this next green light and then go 3 blocks and you'll find the ice cream cone that you've been desiring. It's not that. It's an orientation toward the presence itself. And when one's identity, when one's understanding turns away from the self toward the divine over and over and over again, it becomes an actual physical presence that then leads one through life.
You know, I'd like to talk about your work as chaplain, right? I would think that for someone who has committed a crime and has been sentenced, right? Does that become their identity? And how do you help them? Because I would think like there's this one terrible thing that happened. This is you. Because what you explained to me earlier about sort of the methods that are being used where you're at are very different than in terms of like it's not about punishment, correct?
It's not about punishment.
Right.
It's not about punishment. There is punishment, okay? There is punishment. Sure. If you do something wrong, if say for instance you have internet privileges and you abuse your internet privileges, you can lose that for a year, and they might move you from minimum security to medium security. Or if you get violent, they might put you in segregation for a week. So there is that, but it's more carrot than it is stick. It's like, we can help you. There was one guy who I don't know how long his sentence was, but it was pretty long. But he ended up with I think he got his GED, and then and then he learned to code. And before he got out, he was earning 6 figures, paid off his debt to society, to the court ordered fines, saved enough money to buy a house and continue with this company when he left. And so his life is completely transformed. He's like the shining star example, right? Not everybody's like him, but he's the aspiration for the entire place. And at the moment, my work is a lot of administration and restructuring systems. So I'm a systems person. I'm an analytical person. I'm trying to rebuild systems so that they flow smoothly, and then we can get to the other work. But in these hospice groups, there's a hospice group, and I don't go to do their job with the hospice people or the people who are dying, but I sit with them in their conversations. And as I listen to these guys talk, and they're long-termers, and some of them have done, what society considers terrible things. But they might have been in there for 15, 20, 30 years, and they're not the person they were when they came in. And they are, I'm working, I can see inside of them the aspiration for compassion and for self-healing. And so I haven't been in the prison long enough to develop any programming, but I've talked to them. It's like at the hospice meeting yesterday, I was like, so who here ever meditated? And what did you gain from this? So I'm kind of like dropping seeds here and there, and I'm having
Yeah.
individual conversations. And it's the
Yeah.
first job I've ever had where I went into the job openly as a near-death experiencer. So I go to the interview in my resume, all right? In my resume, it's in my resume, it's in my cover letter,
Yeah.
which is crazy, right? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm sitting there with two of the wardens and the woman who became my supervisor, who's beneath the commissioner in the state level. And I'm completely open about it. And that I think that they knew me because I was on television here. So they all knew who I was because, I spent 15 years on TV. And so they allow me to be myself, which is very different from anything I've ever done in my life before. And so I was always myself. Okay. But I was never
Yeah.
openly myself.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And I'll explain it this way. When I right out of divinity school, I got this job. I got recruited. So I get recruited into this job. And it's a 3-year contract. And that's what I'd made this secret deal with God. I'll try ministry for 3 years. And then if I don't like it, I'm back to the doctorate. And so I'm in this job and we're working with the homeless in New Haven and going into the homeless shelters and soup kitchens. And I had this youth group and I went back when my book came out now 10 years ago. That was the first place I went to speak. They invited me back to speak, and the church was packed, and a bunch of the youth who are now lawyers and doctors and teachers, and they all were there. And one of them says to me, we knew you weren't telling us something. We knew it. We could tell you that you were barefoot in the pulpit. You're working with the homeless. You're saying all this weird stuff that we never heard from anybody else. And I feel it was always coming out everywhere I went. I was always, I couldn't help but be myself. But in this position, I'm unmasked. In the church, I was always masked, even though it was spilling out. It was like I was wearing the professional tie and jacket, but I had clown shoes on. And so they were like always out there, 5 sizes too big for everybody to see. I think the difference is now is that I want to help be an agent of cultural support to the main correctional model and in a spiritual way. And I'm pretty sure that's why they hired me, is so that I can be an influencer inside the prison to help these guys find inside themselves the golden goodness that they actually are, because some of them are never going to get out. They will never get out. And so the pressure of the prison, everybody's choosing your clothes, when you eat, when you sleep, how long you spend in your cell, where you have your toilet next to your bunk and your roommate, and you got to sit on the toilet in front of your roommate, and all the toilets for residents in the prison have all the doors are open. Right. So it's a very pressure place, and I think that there will be some people who will be able to find and understand that the true self is in here. And if I get a few people to practice and create this wave of change, that's my goal. See if we can create a wave of change.
That's awesome, Peter. That's awesome. That, I understand that some people do very terrible things, but I think at the end of the day, I was about to say we're all human, but we're all energy.
But we are both.
Yeah, true. But I can't help but think that no matter who you are, what you did, there is a past to you, without saying it's time, but there is something that made you that way, And I have a really a hard time separating that sometimes, regardless of what's happened, because, you know, I think everyone's a victim to something.
Lots of domestic violence and sexual assault gets passed down family lines because
Yeah.
that, and that's
Hmm.
an example. And my wife
Yeah.
told me tonight over dinner that she was talking to somebody who used to work in one of the jails in our state, was a
Okay.
teacher in this jail, and that while this woman was there teaching, a study was done,
Yeah.
and in this study it found, among other things, that the one most common thing among all the women in this jail was that they did not have dinner with their families at night. And there were lots of other commonalities, but that was the
Sure.
one that was the topper, at the very tip top. And that gets to the whole, how are you raised? What's the context of your
Yeah.
family life?
Hmm.
And so that's not their fault. They didn't make that
Yeah.
happen.
Right. I mean, one of the topics we've discussed on on the podcast before has been on intergenerational traumas, trauma bonding, that kind of thing, and it's deep. It's deep, and we all have it. We all have it because we're just always doing our best, and sometimes we don't even realize that what we think is our best that we're doing is actually hurting someone. I had a guest a few weeks ago that talks about like the pendulum swings from generation to generation, right? That you're trying to overcorrect what you
Right.
thought was done to you, and what was done to you was an overcorrection of what was done to them. And I was like, oh my god, when's it ever going to end? And I mean, I think it's kind of like again with the internet and having more awareness, things like podcasts. That's what I love. I love podcasts, not just my own, but I love podcasts in general because, it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you learn per se, but awareness is and understanding different perspectives is pretty cool too.
It's like it's like reading lots of novels because you get to be the character in the novel and you learn about their life.
Mhm.
Podcasts are like that. I'm a podcast fan too.
Yeah.
I got a lot of ones that I listen to on a regular basis because I learn from them, but also I get to
Yeah,
understand human nature through them, other people's
for
experience.
sure. For sure. For sure. Um, any new books?
No, I'm in hiatus at the moment because I'm gone from my house 50 hours a week for this job right now. And so
Ooh,
it's 40 hours and it's a 2 hour commute back and forth, 1 hour each way. And
yeah.
what I'm trying to do is the movie that I was making has ended. There was a, a, a disagreement over which we could not, uh, which we
Agree on.
couldn't solve. Right. And
Hmm.
so now I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to market that because I have a complete package now for a ready-made movie. And
Wow.
I mean, I got the book that I wrote, so I've written chapters around what I wrote, and so I've got 11 chapters left for the next book using those chapters that I wrote. But my first task is to
Okay.
try to see if I can sell this book to somebody and see if we can make this movie. And my wife's
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to be working so all the time." I'm like, nah, no, I think I just would like to like hand this off to somebody. Like, here's the here it
Yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
there it goes. And then I'll be able to figure out how to get those 11 other chapters written. I also have to take a class, so I have to take this thing called clinical pastoral education level 1 in order to keep my job as a chaplain. Most of my friends in divinity school, they all took the same class. I did not take it because I was never going to be a chaplain or a minister. I was going to be a professor. And so I wrote my dissertation that semester. And so so next up for me, starting in January, is I got to take this like 4 or 5 months class in order to do all the stuff I've been doing for the last 40 years. It's not like it's like I got to get the stamp. I got to get the stamp on the back of my palm, or they won't let me into the
Yeah.
club.
Oh, go figure.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I did what I had to do in school. I'm a much better worker than I am. I'm not. I'm actually a very good student, but it's not. I didn't like doing that. I don't like being a student. I am a student of life,
Mm,
definitely, but again, that's on my terms.
right. I'm,
My terms.
right.
Yeah, accounting school was tough,
Oh, I bet it
but
was
I did well.
terribly tough.
It was very, very. The school I went to was a tough school, so but it actually puts very good accountants out. So, um, yes,
I'm sure that that's true.
yes, yes. But I'm a much better accountant in practice than I was studying. Like I enjoy it in practice, not I didn't enjoy studying it. I'd rather
Yep.
study life.
I'd rather study life.
But
Yes.
I never expected this path ever. Oh, I never expected this path, but there's like a calling. There's a calling that says, you know what? Um, you should put information out there. The stuff that interests you, the stuff that you're curious about. Apparently, there are other people who are curious about the same things. So I guess it works.
Yeah. Look at you. You got this big podcast that, and people that you have guests who want to talk to you, and yeah.
Listen, Peter, we have people asking to be on the show now. See, I wasn't expecting that either. I was just the first time we got someone who's like, "Hey, I'd love to be on your podcast. Looks great. I could talk about this." I was like, "You're coming to us?" So that was, and you wanted to come back. That was
Oh,
awesome. Oh my God, when you said, "I would love to be back if you'd have me," I was like, yeah, for sure. I love talking to you. Oh my gosh. And just, it's, you have something to share that everyone has a question about, I think. Everybody's curious about that.
yep.
Yeah. But going back to it, that curiosity, I believe, is really more of like, hey, do I need to be afraid here?
Right. Yep.
I don't know why I'm not that afraid.
Oh, you froze.
I can't explain it why. I don't know.
There was this fella who died in my arms once, and he was petrified for all the things that he'd done in his life that that his childhood preacher told him he was going to go to hell for. And in the end, as he died, he had been fearful up until the moment, and as he died, he saw the light, and he had this peace come over him. And I was holding him in my arms, and he died without fear in the end, because he turned his eyes toward the light, and that's all that it takes in life and in death.
Yeah. Peter, why are we taught that way sometimes?
Power and control.
Yeah. It's always that.
It's always that. That's what it always comes down to. And it's not just institutional power and control. Institutional power and control is built on individuals who want power and control, and they want it collectively. But there's usually, some one person who's behind all of it.
Yeah.
And how would you raise an institution, a wealthy institution, to control people's minds without fear? Fear, you look all through history, that's how despots and authoritarians and religions create great wars.
Yeah.
They make the other, they're fearful of the enemy.
Yeah. But still, the worst thing that can happen in people's minds is dying.
Yeah, which is really weird to me, because there are many worse things than death. Death is the best part. Death is the easy part. The dying part, that can be hard.
Yeah. The physical dying.
Yeah, that can be tough.
You mean?
Yeah.
Because you've seen that happen.
Well,
you had a painful experience. Was the second time painful?
Second time was physically painful, but I was not frightened at all. I was like,
right.
I was anticipatory. with a smile on my face, which was, kind of freaky.
Yeah.
But the doctors and nurses in my town all knew this about me anyway. So it wasn't like they were like,
Yeah.
this guy's weird. They're like, oh, there he goes again. But yeah, the dying part, dying can be ALS, ALS, it's a
Yeah.
slow, and you die of
Mhm.
strangulation. Now,
Yeah.
it's pretty hard. But then
Yeah.
the death part, though, that's
Yeah.
freedom and freedom. That's why everybody prays to die in their sleep. And a friend of mine just last week died in his sleep, a kid I knew and I grew up with, and he died in his sleep. I was like, good for you, Mark. Good for you.
Yeah. Lucky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? I've always sort of had that in the back of my mind of like, okay, death isn't so bad, but like surviving like a really bad accident, or, surviving a stroke, or surviving things where you can't take care of yourself, or you have to depend on other people that you don't want to do that to, yeah, I think that too. Worse things can happen. Death
Loss of
isn't the worst one.
It's not. It's actually a relief for most people who die.
Yeah.
As they get to leave their pain behind. And that's really what I think everybody's afraid of in the dying process. Not only what you said is true, loss of self reliability, loss of quality of life, but pain.
Yeah. Pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So shop that script.
Yep, that's what I'm going to do. I finally figured. I decided, what's my first step? I was trying to there's a bunch of famous people in Maine. I don't know any of them. I know that they're here, like movie star kind of people. Like, so I was listening to could I just write them a letter? And I'm like, that's stupid. That's a dumb thing. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to firstwriter.com, where I got my first literary agent, and I'm going to look for a film agent.
Oh, is that how you would do? I wouldn't even know where to start with a book. I don't even know that either.
Firstwriter.com. I tell everybody who's an author, wants to be an author, if you want an agent, you want to sell to a publisher, firstwriter.com. It's a subscription. But you can you can buy a month. You don't have to buy a year. All right.
Yeah.
Buy a month.
Yeah.
And it's not expensive. And one of the things it does, among many things, is it's a clearinghouse for literary agents, and hopefully film agents, because I haven't looked at it for a while, but I think so. And that's how I got my first agent, because a successful author told me about it.
Isn't Stephen King from Maine?
Yes, and I'm acquainted with Stephen King. When I was on television, we were a 501c3 nonprofit sistered to a corporation, and so we had to raise money for expenses. The corporation produced all of our materials. We had $1 million worth of production every year, but we never saw that in cash. And so at one point, I knew that he watched, because he wrote me a letter, and so I wrote back to him. It's like, hey, I heard you had a foundation. Want to kick something in? And he did. He and his wife kicked in a bunch of money to help us survive that year. And I thanked him, and that was my experience with him. Although I did run into him near the goats at the Common Ground Fair. There's a country fair in Maine. It's an organic. It's famous in New England. And I'm standing by the goats, and it's a weekday, because I was a minister, so I didn't have to go on the weekend at this point. It's like a Wednesday, and he walks right up to me, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think of them goats?" And I'm like, "Oh, hi, Stephen," and like as if I know him. But yeah, he's from here, and there are others too, but I don't know. I'm not personally friends with these guys, men and women.
Yeah.
So.
But you see, it started with a letter.
It did.
See?
So
Maybe you should write letters. Maybe you should be writing letters.
Maybe I will. I'll think about that.
Yeah. Maybe that's a sign.
It could
write
be.
A letter. Yeah.
I'll think about it, because, well, anyway.
Yeah. Well, I will be first in line for that movie.
Well,
I will definitely want to see that. I'm better at watching things than reading things.
Well, human beings are visual.
Yeah. 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 Peter, thank you so much.
Anytime, Chris. It's always a pleasure.
The Chris Senise Podcast is about becoming the best version of yourself while living your best life. This podcast dives into neuroscience, energy healing, manifesting, workplace strategies, and conflict resilience with real conversations and practical insights you can use right now. Subscribe and join a community that's all about growth, curiosity, and living your best life. Let's explore what's possible together.